Welcome, real estate rock stars, to Real Estate Rock and Roller. So you want to be a rock and roller? Well, let's get the show on the road and keep as much as we can the content relevant to what's going on in the environment now. Session 4, this one is about elevating those active property sellers. Nothing can be, I would imagine, more frustrating than coming across someone who said, yeah, we want to make the move. They're active inside the market, yet, and they're doing their research and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to actually listing the property, they're holding off. And you kind of know that they're just going to be confronting a whole bunch of frustrations moving forward. Well, it comes to the consummate professional, particularly at the top end, to wrestle control. And most of the control that you want to wrestle is typically done through enthusiasm in the first instance. And that's something that we talk about all the way back into the in prospector school, actually, for newbies, for new recruits when they come on, sales associates. We're constantly driving across to them that your lack of knowledge inside the marketplace will always be compensated by just demonstrating sheer unadulterated enthusiasm, and in your communications holding that staunch jawbone and just being extremely confident. Just a quick reminder, many of you may have heard me say this before, but at the end of the day, in leadership, and that's what this is, if you're a peak performance pro, you're a peak performance professional, you're a real estate rock and roller, well, confidence is the major thing that you have to exude, and leadership, in exuding that leadership, in demonstrating that leadership, we say that in leadership, you don't have to be right, you just have to be certain. And this portrays confidence beyond any shadow of a doubt. And again, it's this is where I start to call upon, rock stars to look at what's going on in the marketplace opportunistically. There's lots of speculation as to what the market might do. We talked about this a deal when I said that it's not a V-shaped recovery that we have in our sights. I mean, the fallout in most sectors worldwide, quite frankly, of economies is about to hit, because governments, particularly in the Western world, only have so much money. There's only so much they can support economies in and around COVID, and we've still got to get in there and muck in as best we can. So, whilst people are talking about a V-shaped recovery, it's not only highly unlikely, I think it's just totally improbable. It's just not likely to occur. A U-shaped recovery, kind of like the same thing. There's fallout that's going to take years to recover. And if there is any short-term recovery, and I've got to say, I reckon that's already been on the back of the stimulus, that, there's a payback for all of the, I guess, social welfare and help that we've put into to pump or prop economies up. So it is that I say that we're most likely head for an O-shaped environment. And some of you might be a little unsure around that. Well, this is where I like to, especially at the Rockstar level, instill confidence by saying to you that for me, the opportunity that was born out of the last time I saw a market hit a wall the way I believe it's going to right now, for me personally, was undoubted. Most people looked at it and just panicked and thought, well, this is going to be the end. I did talk about this the last time we spoke. And they said words to the effect of, well, nobody's going to want to buy. But I'm like, how many people are going to want to sell? And if there's one area in the marketplace that you can control with some, I guess, complete and utter commitment, is that of listing properties. And, we're seeing in a lot of respects. So I always think, and one of the things, you might be writing this down, or I hope that this really hits home with you, that doesn't matter what happens in the sales environment, buyers will still not look at a marketplace. Bloody hair, need to get a haircut. buyers will still look at this marketplace in the context of them when they're out there looking. They just want the best property they can get or the best home that they can afford. So, again, I'll say this quick reminder, sellers sell houses and property, buyers buy homes. And if you still use that language of home, couple that with the word feel, don't ask buyers to think about it, they still will part with the money. Yes, there are some limiting factors, some external things that we don't have any control around. If they're borrowing money, LVRs may change, lenders might change their criteria. There might be a reluctance to lend money despite the fact that interest rates are at an all-time low. But still, the beat will go on. And buyers, so long as you as an estate agent can reinforce the value proposition to them, then you're well and truly on the way. Just as a haphazard thing, I was talking to one of our sales professionals in Sales Trainer Mentor this morning. We're talking about, advertising and getting appointments out there. Why not actually have out there a series of booking numbers? You can do this manually as a sales professional now. Just allocate on the weekend, allocate during the course of the week, set times, even have them stuck in an email. You can have them, once every hour or once every 45 minutes, whatever you deem to be appropriate, and then just be advertising. And in the ads, just have a link that comes back and they can kind of bags or reserve a time to look. If they then surrender the information that you need, their mobile phone number, and indeed their email address, you can call and qualify these people, and you can start to look for the characteristics that I deem to be necessary for you to have the probability of them going ahead of buying. One is, first, most important, that they're cooperative. Now more than ever, they should be cooperative around the mode that's working out there. And that is, of course, that you actually have to have one-on-one appointments, and they're only able to see one property at the same time. I appreciate that if you're not in an area that's in lockdown, that this is not the case, but you've got to be prepared that this is going to be happening off and on many times. And of course, if you can run the open for inspections, I still think that you're kind of entitled, given that even by law, you've got to actually capture certain details. I think there's an entitlement to ask certain questions around someone's capacity to buy and sell. So they need to be cooperative. They need to be decided on the area. They need to be realistic in the type of property that they're looking at buying and the amount of money they're spending, reasonable in their expectations, and they need a deadline. So most buyers that are out there at the moment, especially in areas that are going through lockdowns or similar restrictions, can only be fairly well qualified, and you can just reassert this. And again, to me, that's an opportunity, because I prefer to work with qualified buyers in showing them property, because I know that they are able to buy, and then it's just a matchmaking process. And to me, this makes perfect sense. I'm also seeing, as a fallout for what's going on, and again at this level, you might be finding yourself subjected to the notion of discounting. And this can be justified with a number of dispositions that might be stated to you on behalf of property sellers. They could be, for argument's sake, suggesting that there's so many agents and there's a distinct lack of properties on the market, therefore they're entitled to a lesser fee. They could be justifying it by saying that the market's falling off, therefore they can't afford to pay it because the price they would have gotten and what they're going to get is coming off the boil, so they want things for a cheaper price. This also translates to marketing. You're going to see a lot of pressure with them not wanting to contribute or invest in marketing. To my mind, these things only occur if the consummate professional has failed to present the value proposition and how it works. Do not forget, guys, the principles remain relatively static. And if I was to create an argument around fee right now, I'd say as we move into this market, there is a case to actually increase the percentage that you're asking, given the level of expertise that will be appreciated by people that can see it. But I basically do not lose sight of the argument that, for example, if I'm up against three agents and they're all of a sudden offering discounts before they even commence on their regular fee, before they even commence on the transaction, I just look at the seller and I start with this thought in my own mind that I'm then transferring across to them. Who would discount a fee that didn't have to? And that's an opening line that makes sense. If when I have someone say to me, look, we really like you, we like what you're doing, and the reality is that we want to give it to you, but there's an agent down the road, you're at 3%, they're at 2%, and we just can't equate why we would be handing over 2%. And I just look at them and say, hang on a sec, whoa. If we were both free of charge, if there was no charge to use either of us, it sounds to me like you would choose me almost straight away. And they go, yeah. So I say, would you agree that this agent, because like the question I have for you, who would reduce a fee that didn't have to? And then I'll almost certainly agree, well, yeah, no, they wouldn't. So they're not actually reducing this fee because they're trying to be a good bloke or a nice lady. It appears to me that they are offering you this discount because they feel like they have to win the business. Would that sound about right? They go, yeah, well, that's generally what's happening out there. And I say, look, this agent that's now offering you this fee at 2% rather than where I'm at, if they could command a fee of 3%, would they? And the obvious answer is yes. And I say, well, if they could and would, the question must beckon, why don't they? Now, if the answer to that, of course, is hard to come up with, I look at them and say, could it possibly be that they don't perceive themselves to be as good as me? Is that a chance? And they go, yeah. I said, if they don't perceive themselves to be as good as me, does that then mean that they're less than confident in themselves? Surely that can only mean that their confidence has been diminished somewhat to be in that position before even embarking on the project. They go, yeah. And I say, what type of person do you want representing you in a negotiable situation? A confident person or a less than confident person? And then the answer from there is relatively obvious. I say, so you wouldn't want a less than confident person representing you. So it sounds to me like you would want me to do everything I could in my power to prevent you from allowing you to put your property in the hands of a less than confident person. They go, yeah. So how about I don't let you talk about this agent again? You see, these things do not change. And it's that dialogue, it's that rhetoric, it's that question, that's that involvement, it's that communication that I just shared with you that overcome the negatives in the environment that we're going to go into. Understand this, there is going to be a lot of negativity around that market change. There's going to be a lot of apprehension. This is exemplified by the fact that in many markets at the moment, there is a reluctance for properties to come on the market and a reluctance for people to put their properties on because they can't see others coming on. And at the same time, they are unsure where it's at. They believe incorrectly, in my opinion, that their property would sell quickly. Now, any property sells quickly because finding a buyer is the easy part. The question is, what level of value does it sell at? And to get a property to sell at a premium price, you need two factors. First and foremost, you need time on your side to find the buyer. Yeah. But secondly, you need to be free of the stress of contingent commitment. If you're already committed, you've already bought a property, this is going to create a concession. This is something I explain to sellers in great detail. Do not put yourself into a financial vice because this has the net effect of devaluing your property. Now, similarly, when we get into the marketing equation. And I've seen this happen with the advent of, off-market listings. What is this absurdity that's going on? And I know it's got legs, and you're probably all sitting there saying, as someone that's in a training role as a leader, why on earth would you be going down this path? Well, I'd be the first to say to you that I would be comfortable with the idea of putting a property onto the market without promoting it, without doing that, if in the climate that I've got. But I would still be strongly recommending, or at least articulating after the fact, once I actually had the listing agreement in my hands, that by not marketing the property, you're running the risk of devaluing it. You see, great real estate agents know the difference between marketing and advertising. Advertising for buyers is a nonsensical thing at present because there are more buyers out there than we actually need. But not investing in marketing is absolute insanity. Not investing in the presentation of a property, how it is shown, not understanding that from a buyer's perspective, the greater the perception they have of the property, the more value they see in it, the more money they're willing to part with. This is a derivative of exemplary marketing, of marketing that exceeds the realms of just presenting a property for what it is. If you create great perceptions, you can actually make a property look better than it actually is. And I know that many of you are saying, oh, how on earth can you do that? They're going to physically see it anyway. Well, it is largely about perceptions. You look at bottled water, the perception they have, which has now become a reality, is one where people believe that bottled water is better for you than tap water. Now, I know there might be some chlorination things and all that sort of stuff, but what if I go and get a water filter and I have that being filtered out of the water? I'm in the same disposition as I am with bottled water at a fraction of the price. So the reality is that we have to be more focused than ever on adding value in the place of giving discounts. Discounts is the easy way out, yep. But it also sets a precedence for more work with less reward. So you are literally, if you go down the path of discounting, you're giving yourself an hourly pay cut that you just don't need, especially if there is trouble that sits around that. So in elevating sellers, the next thing that I want to draw your attention to, and I hope that you make some moves around this almost straight away, is understanding that where I believe most of the problem is occurring is, still the same things exist. We're identifying sellers when they're in that research phase, when they're out there, active property sellers, trying to figure out the comparative value of other properties that have been on the market and that have sold, visiting open for inspections, getting information from agents, following up on sold buys and things that come through. And they're trying to ascertain that the value of their property is greater than or equal to the amount of money they need to fulfill whatever motive that they have in play. And then now more than ever, it's absolutely imperative that you drive your product into a motive-centric environment. Everything should be about saying to the prospective seller, the active property seller, what is it that you are trying to do? Now, they're then moving into the presentation phase. Granted, it's a little bit harder fought than we thought. We go down, we run the presentation, and then invariably there's some resistance where they'll say, well, we need to find something to buy before we move, or there's some degree of uncertainty. There are a lot of sellers that are saying, we want to finish off renovations before we go ahead and put it on. And they're sadly making a simple assumption that the market is going to continue to escalate the way that it has done in the last 2 or 3 years. Now, I could be totally wrong and it might do that, but to my mind, you've got to prepare them for the fact that that is highly unlikely. And in fact, there is a greater likelihood that it will come off. And if it does end up oversupplied, certainly as we get into the spring months this year, down here in the Southern Hemisphere, it's going to be a different environment. I reckon a lot of people are holding off to put it on. I reckon you're going to have a flood of property that comes onto the market. This means oversupply. This is invariably going to drive prices back. And this is a good reason to be talking owners through and getting them to understand. In any event, I say that we get to the listing presentation, then they move into the selection phase. They've interviewed 2 or 3 agents. We're doing not much more than ringing them up and badgering them in. And I reckon most of the problems that occur around this are a direct result of us making everything price centric rather than motive centric. So I bring it into the space and I say, look, you know, at the end of the day, what's happening in the marketplace? Yes, it's great that you can actually maybe sell your property at a premium and cash in on that. But at the end of the day, it's still about fulfilling your motive and getting you moved to where you want to be. Tell me what it is that you're trying to do, and I will put together some sort of program that will ensure that we get there. Now, once they come away from the presentation and we're just following them up, if you're that agent that's just ringing them every day and going, get it on, get it on, get it on, get it on, without any good explanation, without any good understanding of why they should do that, then we all kind of look the same. Again, what's going to come into play, what fees they're charging, what price they're quoting, what marketing expenses they have. And for me, I can run the assumption that they're all the same. So when the time does come, I'll probably go for the lowest percentage coupled with the most optimistic price that I'm going to get. And of course, the least amount of expenses in marketing and the like. See, I say that this phase is the least contested. I've said this for many years. And what you've got to have is not just this badgering and driving them crazy and ringing them every other day to see whether they're ready to list. Instead, I think you've got to have a difference between passive communication and active or direct communication. I'm not saying give up on the direct communication. Calling them up and talking to them directly is probably the best. I do think the subject matter has to change. I do think when you're talking to them direct, it needs to be motive-centric conversations that you're having. But in the interim, you can balance this out and not run the risk of them basically saying to you, will you stop ringing us? We'll call you when we're ready. Or worse, where they then start to say, look, we've decided we're not going to sell. You've got now no good reason to call them. They're telling you not to call. They are actually selling. They're only told you that because they just want you to stop badgering them and ringing them. So you've got to balance this passive contact. And passive communication, for my mind, is as good as ringing them, but it's even better in that it's not going to drive them crazy to the point where they then start to reject you and push you away. So there's some little things that you need to think about. We've got these in place for most of the clients that we're supporting on the RE RocknRolla program. We do the same inside a sales trainer mentor, and at the prospecting level, those sales associates that are in prospector school, we're teaching them the same thing. So if you have a pre-list kit, but I prefer to have something that's more educational that teaches them about the market and how it actually operates, we have a thing called the Property Sellers Research Guide. If that wasn't sent to them ahead of the listing presentation, I would send that out retrospectively. Again, great information that can come out. I'm sending them SMSs, so they are receiving texts twice a week. So we don't want it to happen anymore. Roughly every 72 hours is enough, where we're talking about having successfully moved people and focusing in on the motive, that their motive was satisfied and it was done inside a timely fashion. You can even have texts that say, some agents say you need to find something first before you actually sell. Well, we said you need to get your property on the market before you sell, and this has been a success. Mary and James successfully moved to their new property and wherever it is, and they do it stress-free. That sort of stuff going out, that's evidence of the fact that you're selling. It's entirely relevant market information. You're not ringing them up and badgering them, but you are still present. You're still top of the mind in terms. Welcome home invitations. I don't care whether you met them at one of your open for inspections or welcome homes, as we call them. You still go ahead and send them invitations to these open for inspections, because again, it's good connection. It's good contact. It makes you present. Again, you're not ringing them and badgering them. I keep saying this over and over again because you want to balance the amount and you want to actually jockey yourself in the first position. Now, of course, if your competition isn't sending something like the Property Sellers Research Guide. They're not sending SMSs. They're not sending invitations to open homes. The next one, of course, is sending out your, well, we call it the market roundup. It answers those two questions: what's happening in the market, what properties are selling, and that information's coming to them without you necessarily having to ring them and go through it. At least, again, you're showing presence. And then, and last but by no means least, you need to send them evidence of buyers. Yes, I know that you think that's a given. I know that you might think that they think that's a given and that buyers are just there, but you would be amazed if you can actually talk to them about specific buyers for their property that you are very keen to get through the moment that they get the property on the market, especially if you've been cleverly explaining the difference between listing and selling, that listing is not selling, it just creates the opportunity. If you can then explain to them the virtues of being in a position where you know where you are with your sale and what your buying power is, and sometimes that can be better than you had counted for, so you can go ahead and buy a better property than you'd hoped for. This again is another powerful thing that can be put in place. Anyway, you can see all of those, and there's other little ones that we can think of, or that we've thought of and we'll present to you, but at least there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. I'll just recap those. Something like a property seller's research guide or a pre-listing kit, SMS texts going out at least twice a week, and no more, actually, ideally twice a week, I should say. Welcome homes, inviting them to other open for inspections that you're having in real time, sending them information via the market roundup, telling them what's going on in the market, what their property value might be doing at present, and then information on individual buyers. Couple this or balance this, which is what I prefer, with the direct contact. So you've got passive contact and indirect contact. You will find that you are elevating your active property sellers to actually list the property rather than talking about it. You are very much competing favorably against the competition. You are diluting their argument for fee reductions. If you become very competent, you've done a great job of presenting marketing at the listing presentation, they will understand that it's an investment rather than an expense, and that it is commercially reckless to bypass that investment, that it can actually devalue the property rather than protect the value. Get all those things in order and you will activate them and your listings will start to flow. Do not fall for the crap. Do not be one of the crowd. If you are conducting your business on the same playing field that they are, then you're subjected to competing with them directly. Change the name of the game, change the rules of the game, but most importantly, change the platform and elevate those sellers. It's one thing to identify them, then you have to educate them and then empower them to hand the listing of the property and the sales transaction over to you. My name's Mark Dwyer. I am a real estate rock and roller. You can email me, Mark with a K at realestaterockstar.com.au. My phone number is +61 410 592 165. I'd love to talk to you about joining us with the Rock and Rollers, where we support you, mentor, whether you're in a team of you and a sales associate or running this whole thing on your own. More than happy to talk to you whenever you see fit. Bye for now.